Yeah, welcome and welcome back to another episode of the Format Podcast. Thanks for tuning in today. Got a pretty interesting show for you. Been meaning to get to this one, but definitely want to make sure I talk about it, even though it happened a few days ago. And this is about the legendary Dr. J and his top 10 list. We got to get to that. But before we do, you know what time it is. If you haven't already, please go ahead, click that, like that, subscribe, and that notification bell right here on YouTube on your screen. And if you want the audio only version of the podcast, open up your audio podcast platform, hit the search bar, type in the Format Podcast. We should come right up. Give us that like if you enjoy the content or the 5-star review. And please make sure you share this podcast with friends, family, enemies, whoever it is, people that you know love sports that might want to hear a different voice than what you hear on the typical mainstream sports media. When you do that, it helps us find more fans, helps more fans find us, and let's get right to it. Okay, so I talk a lot about LeBron on this channel. I know I do, but really you can't talk the NBA for the most part without talking about him. So here he is again. And one of the biggest things I've talked about is what I believe is a phony and manufactured GOAT debate, right? I don't believe that LeBron James is the second best player of all time. I certainly don't believe he's the best player of all time. And a lot of people feel like he's one of those two things. I also am very annoyed with him and his team's constant insistence and pushing the narrative that he's the best player of all time. And if he's not top 5, he's so disrespected, blah, blah, blah. Okay, cool. All right. Now, with that said, I've also talked a number of times about different players and their top 10 lists or their top 5s, etc. And the thing that I keep pointing to, if we're noticing a trend here, there are a lot of players who have played with LeBron, who have played against LeBron, who don't have him top 5, some that don't have him top 10. That's real interesting, right? Steph Curry doesn't have LeBron on his top 5 all time, right? Ray Allen, who played against LeBron and with LeBron and against Kobe and against Michael Jordan, does not have LeBron James on his top 5 all time, right? Or his all-time NBA starting 5, right? He doesn't. So the latest one here, and there's more, but the latest one here that I thought was so interesting was, and this kind of created a firestorm, the legendary Dr. J, who is easily maybe a top 6 small forward of all time, right? Coincidentally plays LeBron James's natural position, the small forward. He recently put out his list of his top 10 players of all time, and I'm going to give you that list. Now, I'm going to tell you before I even start, I don't agree with Dr. J's list. And I think it demonstrates certain things, but I'll get to that. So here's this list in no particular order. Bill Russell, Wilt Chamberlain, Michael Jordan, Jerry West, Oscar Robertson, Elgin Baylor, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, Magic Johnson, Karl Malone, Tiny Archibald. Okay. So I'm going to say this off the top. Again, I'm going to reiterate this. I don't agree with Dr. J's list. For me, there's a lot of guys missing. No Larry Bird, no Hakeem Olajuwon, no Tim Duncan. Yeah, don't agree with that at all. Now, no Kobe. I'm not completely upset if LeBron doesn't make your top 10. Now, I get why a lot of people would think that is egregious based on what LeBron James has done in his career, but we'll get to that. So immediately what stands out to me, Dr. J is a guy who grew up in the 50s and 60s. He was in college in the late 60s and went to the NBA right at the end of the 60s. Went to the ABA right at the end of the 60s and played, I want to say, up until about 1976. So his early prime, he was playing in the ABA. Anyway, the reason why, if you notice, a lot of these players, these are the players that Dr. J grew up watching. Bill Russell, Wilt Chamberlain, Jerry West, Oscar Robertson, Elgin Baylor, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, Magic Johnson, Tiny Archibald, right? Well, no, Tiny Archibald, he would have played against him. But the point I'm trying to make, these are guys that he grew up watching. Some of them he played against. Obviously, he caught early Michael Jordan. He caught early Karl Malone. He played against Kareem Abdul-Jabbar for many years. Watched Elgin Baylor, watched Oscar Robertson, watched Jerry West, watched Wilt, watched Bill Russell. And so there's that. These are the guys that he grew up idolizing. So I get it. Also, he would, even if he never played against him, he probably would have known Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. those being like New York City guys. Same with Tiny Archibald. He would have known those guys personally, probably played with and against them in the Rucker and in the Parks and stuff like that. So there's that relationship that was built, along with their greatness as players. So totally get it. Magic Johnson, anyone who doesn't have Magic Johnson in their top 10, in my estimation, is just a fool. Karl Malone, I think, is all-time great, but to have him on the top 10 and not Tim Duncan is, I find that egregious. Jerry West, my problem with him in the top 10, as great a player as he was, you're 1-8 in the finals all time. You can't be top 10. You just can't. You got to find a way to win. Now, don't get me wrong. Those Celtics teams were loaded, and there was no free agency back then, so Red Auerbach could keep them together year after year. But 1-8 in the finals, man, that's tough. Even though Jerry West was a great player, but when you put it all together, I don't think that he was a top 10 player. Oscar Robertson never won until he got with Kareem, but he kept running into the Celtics, right? So there's that. I have no problem with Wilt Chamberlain, top 10. Michael Jordan, of course, is the GOAT, greatest of all time. This is a tough list for me. Again, there's no Kobe, there's no Larry Bird, there's no Tim Duncan, there's no Hakeem Olajuwon. All those extremely problematic for me, right? So if I got to take guys off this list, I take Jerry West off this list, I take Oscar Robertson off this list, I take Elgin Baylor off this list, I take Karl Malone and Tiny Archibald. All those guys have to come off of this list. Now, with that said, I totally get why he's got the guys that he's got, and I mentioned that. But now we get back to the LeBron thing, and I can see why LeBron and his team would feel disrespected by this particular list, because LeBron, I think, is better than a bunch of these guys. Jerry West, Oscar Robertson, Elgin Baylor, Karl Malone, Tiny Archibald, he's better than those guys. Now, that said, when my top 10 comes together, I don't really have a space for him. And I know a lot of people think that's crazy, but so be it. My list. But yeah, this is amazing. So what it keeps getting back to for me is when you look at this thing, and if LeBron is what he says he is and what so many of his fans say he is, why are there all-time great players who don't feel that way? Could it be because of all the machinations throughout his career? I've talked about this, all the constant shuffling of rosters. And now I get it. Organizations are going to make moves to try and make their teams better. But if you're LeBron and you're pulling the strings from behind and sometimes, in front of the curtain, but you're pulling these strings and you're making these moves and it's so constant. If you're what you say you are, why do you always need so much help? Why do you always need so much roster reconstruction? Now, other than Anthony Davis, that 2020 championship team from the Lakers that LeBron was on, there's nobody else on that team. Why? Right? If you look it up and you read about it, you're hearing that LeBron is still behind the scenes trying to maneuver to get Kyrie Irving to LA. Why? If you're that dude that you say you are, why do you always need so much help? Why do you always need so much roster reconstruction? Why? I mean, all you got to do is go back and look at it throughout his career. Now, you can say now, well, he's old. What's he supposed to do? But at the same time, he's the greatest 39-year-old player we've ever seen. Oh, okay, cool. So pick one, right? Either he's old or he's the greatest 39-year-old player we've ever seen. Cool. So you got all these things, but a lot of players, I think, don't appreciate that. I think a lot of players don't think that LeBron has the requisite mental toughness to be that guy. And I mean, I chalk it up to this. Like I said, you got a Ray Allen. This is the big one for me. Ray Allen played with LeBron. He played against Kobe. He played against Michael Jordan. And he didn't put LeBron James in his starting five. Like, that should say something to you, right? That should say something to you. Now, you got guys like Rob Parker on Fox Sports 1 on The Odd Couple with Chris Broussard, and he's saying he feels like a lot of players are jealous of LeBron. Really? Jealous? I don't think so. I think maybe irritated is more the word, because they're seeing how this guy gets away with so much and gets labeled as something that maybe he shouldn't be labeled as, when they're seeing what it really is. But that's just my opinion. Anyway, what I want to know from you is, what do you think of Dr. J's top 10 list? Where do you think LeBron belongs on the top 10 list? Do you think he is a top 10 player? As crazy as that question may sound. Leave your comments in the comment section. Can't wait to hear from you. Can't wait to respond to them. And I'll be back on the next episode. And I'm out. Peace.